Do you know what the biggest obstacle for sellers is in today's market? Is it the interest rate? Is it the war in Iran? Is it this softening market? Is it the buyer pool? Why do some properties sit for days on end, 80, 100, 120, and then others sell in 1 to 3 days? Well, this one was one that sold in 1 to 3 days, but a lot went into the making of that happening. We're gonna get into it right now. So if you guys are wondering how you found this video or how this video found you, that's the marketing. That's the key. So if you're watching this, you probably live in this neighborhood. You're probably curious about the home prices and the sales and how things are going, either quickly or not. There's a lot that goes into prepping a property, marketing a property, and getting it to the point where on that bell curve of what you're gonna get on the way up as you ramp up is really the trick. So you have to do things like landscaping. You have to do things like prepping. Yeah, you have to. You have to. You don't get to skip that. Now, you don't have to be the ones doing it. I know some of you guys are doing it yourselves and you've done that in the trade. You want to save some money. You can, but it's got to get done. We are not in that pandemic market where there's 40 properties for sale in Ventura and you get to just throw a number out there. We're not there. There's still a ton of equity there. We're in a trader's market where people are selling properties or pulling equity or inheriting equity, and they're still paying those premium prices. Don't get me wrong. But if you throw up too high and you haven't prepped your property, you haven't staged your property, and you haven't HD photographed your property to create digital assets that represent what the buyers in today's market are looking for, you're gonna miss the boat. You're gonna be on for 80 to 100 days like the other one, and it's going to take a long time and it's going to be arduous to sell, and your realtor's going to say, oh, it's the market. It's not the market, it's the marketing. Yes, that's right. So we're going to get into it right now. Let's go check out this property, and we're going to do the difference between having a property on for 80 days and selling within 3 days. So if you check this out right here, this was all overgrown. We had landscapers come out, trim the trees here, did pressure washing in the front. This chain link fence is here, but there was a vine all up on this area here. So here we are going inside. You can see we touch paint all the walls, or painted all the walls, staging. So this is a digital asset. This video here is a digital asset. This is an avatar of me, or I'm filming this live, but this will sit and live like this living room sits and lives as a digital asset of that premium feeling that that buyers are looking for, that thing that signals home. It's not lived in, it's not dated, except for the floors. It's got this modern feel, and that's what buyers are looking for. If you don't convey this message where you glorify the arch, hanging light, the dining area, if you don't convey this message to the buyers, you're gonna fall short. And you can do this by one of two ways: not doing the staging, not doing the HD assets. There are other properties that are staged like vacation, but if you go too high in price and you don't precisely price it, you miss that point and then you risk losing the equity. So let's go back to the point I made about why you're watching this video. Chances are you're watching this video, either it found you or you found it, because you live in this neighborhood or you're shopping in this neighborhood. So that's the part of marketing. See, not only did we get these digital assets, but how we distributed them to the neighborhood and towards people that were coming from far. So someone did buy out of area, but we had at least 4 or 5 local buyers. But because we created that buzz, more than just a charcuterie board, I think it was like 500 invitations, and we literally had about 180 people through. So 180 people through versus like 80 to 100 days on the market, which is better for you? If you're a seller, you've got to go with the seasoned pros, the ones who have proven it. Time and time again, I'm hitting 1.5% nationally, locally, and it's because I've dealt with Spanish homes like this. I know how to prep them. they're different. There's a certain amount of work and maintenance that they need. And there's a big difference if you're showing off to buyers that, oh, here's some maintenance items versus here's some major repairs and renovations that still need to be done. If those are showing ahead of the digital assets like you see here, that's really going to bury your listing. You end up with days on the market and people say, well, what's wrong with the house? And if there is anything, it's just more off. They want it off on the offer price, and then they want it off again during concessions, like they're getting like a double discount. So we've seen that happen. So if you don't want that to be you, then there's a right way to do it. You can subscribe to this channel. You can reach out, shoot us a DM, or just reach out, especially if you have a property like this. And let's say you have a Spanish style home or a dated home and you want to know what repairs to do, because a lot of times you can do things to kind of cue the property up and kind of cue it up for a good sale. And then you can kind of measure, like, do we want to get, do we want to be selling like mid 9s or low 8s? There's another property that they put on the low 8s and they could have been mid 9s. So if you go too low, you could leave equity on them. And one of the other biggest things that I've noticed with sellers is that when it comes to doing paperwork, like getting their disclosures done and ready and prepared, they're not always there. What I like to tell sellers is, would you like to get the best case scenario, an offer on day one without contingencies, all cash, the best scenario you could get, like close in 21 or close in 14 days, quick timeline. If your answer is yes and you want to get the best case scenario, you've got to be prepared for that. And that's more than just prepping the house, but it's prepping your paperwork. Too often sellers will put off doing their disclosures and they don't realize that there's a huge leverage point in doing your contract. In contract, there's a couple of points of negotiation. The key points is initially your first negotiation, which is on price and terms. What this contract, so we go under contract at a price, at a said day of escrow, contingencies as far as your inspections, how many days you'll have on the inspection, how many days on the appraisal, how many days on the loan. Those are the typical contingencies. However, if you haven't done your disclosures, Agents Avid, TDS, SPQ, if you haven't done those, you actually extend the negotiating period on behalf of the buyer unknowingly. This is why you hire agency. This is why you hire agents, is so that we know how to play this chess game. So you're playing chess, not checkers, so that we can make these moves. I always want to have my sellers have their disclosures, and I have all my disclosures done prior to launching the listing, so that if we get an offer day one, we can accept that offer, or we can give reports and disclosures and get a true non-contingent offer. A lot of times people think, oh, we got a non-contingent offer, but if you haven't given the disclosures, you're just buying time and they can back out. They have that California right of rescission. So there's lots of things like that. Escalated time period. Also be an automatic release of deposit. You can do things like that. So buyers might want to do something like that to make their offer really attractive. So you have to know how these things work. So they might have an automatic release. However, they can get it back if the disclosures aren't in, and they can go out off of that. So they need the information. So there's a lot of protections for the consumer. So the super consumer is the buyer, because they're paying for service and they're buying the house. The seller is only paying for service. However, the seller is the first consumer. So they're the ones who decide, yes, I want to sell this asset. So there's a lot of power in that. But once you go into contract, you've really relinquished your power and control to the buyer, as long as the buyer performs to that first set of negotiations. That's why that first negotiation is so important. It's more important than the second one. If you do the first one well, the second round of negotiations, which is typically the inspection, sometimes appraisal, typically you should be able to negotiate that out in the first round if there's an appraisal. We haven't had appraisal issues here in a long time here in Ventura County. Because our values are still there. Even though we slumped off a little bit, we haven't been hit with these lower appraisers. There's still high enough sales in our markets and neighborhoods that an appraiser can give the justified price. And it usually comes in at value. That just is the way it is. If you're at $850, it comes in at $850. If it was at $925, it comes in $925. It's when you start having the big jumps by hundreds of thousands that those appraisal issues will come up. However, even during the pandemic market, people were waiving the appraisals. They were just going all in. How you doing? So these are the big differences that you're going to see in this market and the last market. So appraisals haven't become an issue, but if we see lender tightening, that's one thing that they don't really talk about. We talk about interest rates all the time. We talk about scarcity, we talk about inventory, but if we see lender tightening where they actually get tighter with their rules, we're going to see appraisals really come into play, especially if we start seeing prices slide even more, where you don't have those hero sales. As long as you have the hero sale, would be like, you know, the premium property that keeps continuing raising the bar of a neighborhood or maintaining the neighborhood. So here in Midtown, we've got those 1.4s and 1.6s that kind of happen from time to time, but there are those fixer properties that are happening in the 8s. So the big difference is if you've got a 2.1, are you an $800,000 property or are you a $950 property? I think spending anywhere from like $15,000 to $20,000 will be the difference between you being an $800,000 property and a $950 property. Now, if you have a whole house in a detached unit, you should probably be above 1.1, but really like in the 1.2 to 1.4 category. And depending on the street, the location, the finishes, the overall feel of the home, that's where we're going to be. That's where this market is right now. So now that you guys know what to do, watch this video to see what not to do.